When I was 15, I spent a summer on an island off the coast of Washington state. It wasn't a glamorous vacation. My aunt had recently bought a small cabin on the island and invited me to stay with her. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I wasn't close to her, and spending the summer away from my friends seemed boring. But my mom insisted it would be a great experience, so I packed my things and went. The island was tiny, no more than a few miles long, with only a few dozen residents who mostly lived there year-round. It had a strange, quiet charm, the kind of place that felt stuck in time. My aunt's cabin was nestled in a dense forest on the north end, a good half-hour's walk from the nearest town. It was quaint, with a wraparound porch and windows that seemed to look into nothing but trees. The first few days were peaceful, albeit a bit lonely. My aunt, while kind, wasn't exactly a talker, and the island itself didn't have much in the way of entertainment. I spent most of my time wandering the woods or reading old books I found in the cabin. One evening, after dinner, my aunt mentioned the island's history. "This place wasn't always a quiet retreat," she said, poking at the fire. "Back in the early 1900s, a group of people came here. A commune of sorts. They called themselves the Keepers. I didn't think much of it at the time, it just sounded like a weird local legend. But as she continued, the details grew stranger. The Keepers believed the island held special power, that it was a place where the veil between our world and others was thin. They built homes, lived off the land, and performed strange rituals by the shore at night. For years, no one bothered them. Then, one day, they all disappeared." "Disappeared?" I asked, trying to mask the shiver crawling up my spine. "Vanished," she replied. "Some say they left for good, others believe they found what they were looking for, on the other side." She gave me a half-smile, clearly enjoying the spooky tale. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every creak of the cabin felt amplified, every gust of wind outside seemed like something trying to get in. I lay in bed for what felt like hours, my mind racing through the story my aunt had told me. Eventually, I drifted off, only to be awakened by a soft tapping sound. I sat up, heart pounding. The tapping was faint but rhythmic, coming from somewhere outside. I tiptoed to the window, careful not to make any noise. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the trees, but I couldn't see anything unusual. I was about to go back to bed when I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the forest, just beyond the tree line. My breath caught in my throat. The figure was tall, its face obscured by shadows, but it stood perfectly still, almost like it was waiting for something. For me. I blinked hard, hoping it was just my imagination, but when I opened my eyes, it was still there. The tapping sound grew louder. It wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from inside the house. I turned slowly, my skin crawling. The door to my room was closed, but the sound was definitely coming from just beyond it. My pulse raced, and I considered waking my aunt, but something told me to stay quiet. I crept toward the door, pressing my ear against it, trying to make sense of the noise. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't want to open it. But before I could stop myself, I twisted the doorknob. The hallway was empty, but the tapping continued, louder now, echoing down the stairs toward the front door. I stepped into the hall, my heart hammering, and followed the sound. At the bottom of the stairs, I froze. The front door was wide open. The figure I had seen outside was now standing just inside the threshold, its silhouette sharper, clearer. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes on me. For a moment, neither of us moved. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by fear. The tapping sound had stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. Finally, the figure turned slowly and walked back out into the forest, disappearing into the shadows without a sound. I slammed the door shut and ran upstairs, locking myself in my room until morning. The next day, I told my aunt what had happened, expecting her to laugh it off or tell me it was just a bad dream. But she didn't. Instead, She looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "You saw them," she said quietly. "The keepers,